All right, welcome to the November 2022 Jobs Report and Inflation Update. Each month, this webinar seeks to separate truth from fear, especially with continuing economic volatility, ongoing layoffs, and concern about the future. My name is Albert Chen, founder of Albert's List, the San Francisco Bay Area's most active career community, featuring 47,000 job seekers, hiring managers, recruiters, career coaches, and professionals. With us today and every month is Dr. Riley White, Associate Dean of Teaching and Learning and Associate Professor of Finance at the University of New Mexico. Among many things which you'll find on the Eventbrite page that you RSVP'd on, Dr. White is an advisor for the $4.7 million student-run University of New Mexico Regents portfolio and leader of financial literacy projects in the community. His work and insights have been published in numerous journals and featured in local and national media outlets. We're happy that you've joined us today on this December 14th, the final webinar of the year. Over the next hour plus, you're going to hear a lot of information. It might feel overwhelming. It might feel really interesting. Either way, you're invited to ask questions and share your insights as we understand what lies in store for us in the future. And apparently it seems really, really dark. So Dr. White, I'm going to hand it over to you. And I guess you will be our soothsayer and seer for the future here.
Yes, it's good.
It's a lot brighter than what you prognosticated, but it's over to you.
What an incredible introduction. Thank you so much, Albert. I'm honored as always to be in front of the Albert's List crowd. You all are such an incredibly talented group of individuals from such a variety of backgrounds and such a variety of information. It's such a pleasure to go speak here. I noticed some familiar names, familiar places. If you are new here to this show, to this shindig, never hesitate to reach out with questions midway through this. Happy to answer things that come across your way, anything that we can talk about. And so Albert kind of gave the hint away, is it going to be good? But wait a second, there's all this positive economic news. What are we looking for? And I'll kind of go through a few of these things. Some of the leading economic indicators, not so good. So we're going to take a look at what that means going in the future, and incredibly pleased to be here. So I'll go a quick introduction here. You can kind of see this. I have one of those really wide screens that make screen sharing ever so difficult. But here's the first element of today's presentation. Our November 2022 jobs report and inflation breakdown. We had jobs report a little bit more than a week ago, and inflation, of course, came out this week. So we have a lot to talk about. There's a lot of interesting data in here, a lot of good signs, a lot of good news, but also some causes for concern. One of the things with studying any economic data is all our variables tend to be lagged, which means that when stuff happens, we don't see it often for many months and even potentially years ahead of time. So I'll go into this a little bit, and I kind of want to get a sense of this. My name is Riley White. I'm an associate dean at UNM Anderson School of Management, University of New Mexico. Family from the Bay Area, though, flying out to the Bay Area on Friday. So if you see me on the street screaming economics facts, please say hello. Also, please enter your questions right there into the Albert's List official web chat window, and I will be pleased to answer them as they come on board. All right, so first of all, we're going to hit up jobs, then we're going to hit up inflation, then we'll go a little bit of talking to real estate and some specific Bay Area numbers. Oh, this is good. Is this being recorded? That's the first question. Albert, I think so, right? This ultimately goes on to YouTube, doesn't it?
This ultimately goes on the YouTube. It is being streamed on my Facebook group right now. So I'm going to take that recording down, and that will be going into YouTube.
Great. Thank you so much for the clarification. For YouTube, it's like the world's, if you're looking to fall asleep in the middle of the night, listen to my voice at varying levels of nasalness and verbosity. So let's rock and roll. Let's see what we got here. Whoops, made a copy of that. Shouldn't have done that. Oh, there it is. November 2022 jobs report. Overall, it is looking good from a jobs perspective, but there are some cracks in the veneer that I want you to be aware of. And so it was better than expected, but we have some doldrums on the horizon, and I'll get into what that means. So we added about 263,000 jobs in a good time in a non-post-pandemic or quasi-post-pandemic world. These numbers are pretty good, 260,000 jobs per year, especially considering our relatively low population growth that we've experienced in the last few years, is something to be happy about. But there are some concerns here. One is that, okay, so first of all, unemployment remains near what we call absolute unemployment or maximum employment rate at about 3.7%. That's pretty good. When we think about this in the context of the last 50 years, this is one of the lowest times that we've seen. In the Bay Area, it's a little bit lower than this. It's about 2.6%, to give you a sense of that. And we didn't really reach this level again until right before the pandemic, and so that's pretty good. So for all intents and purposes, this is full employment, people that are looking for a job, have a job, et cetera, et cetera. We noticed 2 months ago, we reached a new high in terms of the amount of people who were unemployed, but unemployed because they quit their jobs voluntarily, and that was a good sign. Now, we know, of course, there are other things as well. We know the pandemic hit certain sectors harder than others, and it hit things like leisure and hospitality particularly hard. We noticed that level had kind of leveled off in the last few months, but in the last iteration of this, we noticed an 88,000 increase in leisure and hospitality jobs that are heavily concentrated in services and drinking places. Often we look for a lot of seasonality in winter. There are a lot of things that happen unusually as we approach the holiday season that don't appear in other areas. But we added $45,000 in healthcare, which of course has been sort of a continuous churn, increasing personnel, and about 42,000 in government, which has been a bit choppier. And that's interesting. We think about government work, government jobs, ranging from everything from, say, working for a national laboratory to everything down to working for municipalities, states, and other forms of government. And they're often confronted by a bunch of issues. In inflationary environments, it's really hard for governments to keep up with wage growth in the way that the private sector might be able to. And a lot of that might be limited in terms of, say, aspects that are structural, things like unions, aspects that are budgetary, and aspects that are just bureaucratic. And there are limitations in those things that allow this part to adjust accordingly. So seeing a government increase in the time of higher inflation in general is assuring, but we actually kind of look at this as we approach the economic cycle. If we enter a recession next year, government employment will likely benefit. Labor force participation. Now, this is interesting. It declined slightly to 62.1%. What is participation? Why do we care? To get a sense of this, participation is the amount of people in our population who are at work or that currently are looking for work. If you're not looking for work, you're not counted as part of the labor force, and you're not counted in the unemployment rate. So it's an interesting number. Labor force participation in the United States peaked around the year 2000. And since then, it's gone down. Every time we have a recession, it goes down sharply. It doesn't really recover fully by the time the next recession happens. Some of that's demographic, right? We know we had a huge swing of baby boomers just kind of go through the economy, and then out the other side, they're retiring, and as they leave the labor force, the participation rate drops. And so some of this is demographic, some of this is permanent, some of this is structural issues with the labor force. But key numbers to think about. But the downside on this is that the labor force has contracted for the last 4 months, and that's never really a good sign, demographic or otherwise, because that's sort of the power, the engine of our growth in the future. So some key numbers to think of here. So, okay, national unemployment rate's 3.7, done. 263,000 net jobs, done. 79.7% share of prime working age population with a job. Within that window, before the age of 64, people with a job, this is very good. These numbers are pretty close to where we are, about 80%, where we would anticipate a high number would be. There isn't a lot of people who are just standing around saying, I'm not going to work. There's a lot of people who have arguments on that level. Most people who look for a job or a part of the work, most people who are of working age are actually working. And there's about 1 million jobs gained since February 2020. And this figure is courtesy of the Economic Policy Institute, EPI. Now, Joe Politano came together with a very cool graph that I like so much that I quoted it here. And this is the shape of job growth all the way back since the beginning of the pandemic. Most new jobs have been in trade and professional services. Let's think about that. So trade makes a little bit of sense. That includes things like transportation. That includes things like utilities. So that includes like a lot of things when you think about the infrastructure of the way that we have products, the way that our supply chains work, the connecting between the manufacturing of a product and selling it to the end consumer. That whole procedure, all of that process involves transportation and other concerns. And then professional services. This is a little bit more nebulous. Aren't you like, well, wait a second here. This is a very interesting, aspect about this that includes a whole bunch of services. And if I get the actual definition of professional and business services. It is a sweeping category. And let me see if I can grab some existing thing, and let me see if I can. And it includes some technical services, NIAX 54 stuff, but also some other stuff in service providing industries for businesses. So if your job anecdotally doesn't fit neatly into one of these categories, it's often there. Oh, the chat doesn't work, says Sean Riley. Hey, Sean, good to see you. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad your question is the chat doesn't work. That's good. I think that's good. I don't know. Albert, is the chat not working?
Yeah, I think this is a flaw that I didn't realize. However, because I think it'll probably require a webinar reset, if y'all can use the Q&A instead to chat, then let's do that instead. So let's do that. I know it's not as fun, but we'll figure it out.
Not as fun. It's fun. It is not as fun, but I promise you,
activated. We'll have the chat activated in January when you give your predictions for 2023.
All right, good to be here. I'm going to answer that live, John. Thank you. Very good. Anonymous attendee asks, what's the false narrative about people not wanting to work? Well, it depends where you're listening. But this is sort of this has been sort of a very tangible thing. People look at things, and I'll kind of really express this drastically. People look at the question of labor force participation superficially. They'll compare that to previous year's labor force participation and go, participation rate's gone down. Fewer people are participating. As a consequence, that means there are fewer people out there in the labor force who are actually working, and they're not having jobs, and they're all that sense, right? That was sort of the COVID pandemic sense. That was one of the fundamental critiques of sort of the $5 trillion of stimulus spending that was made, is that it will enforce sort of a culture of people who don't work. And we're just really not seeing that from the data perspective. And that's sort of what I wanted to address, Anonymous, about the questions of, is there merit to this narrative? And I'm open-minded to that question, because of course we're looking at this. There's a lot of answers for this. One question, we can look at the question of labor shortages in certain sectors, and really that's fundamentally due to the fact that we have job openings in places where there aren't qualified workers or workers able to do those jobs. And that involves, okay, so why is that? There's a lot of reasons for that. Since 2017, we've had fewer immigration. Immigration has kind of gone fairly down quite significantly in the last 5 years relative to our previous pre-2017 averages. And a lot of those have inversely, that has an effect on the labor force. Also, the availability of certain jobs in certain sectors. When the pandemic happened, a whole bunch of people were laid off in leisure and hospitality. Those people didn't wait around for their boss to call for them to get them back. They went and found work elsewhere in other sectors. And so you're finding sort of just the shift of what that means as part of the question. So I really appreciate that question too, because I do say things kind of off the cuff, but you can always ask. There's always a method to my madness, but always ask and be like, what do you mean by this? And that's always the point. But anyway, you get a sense of this. And most of that recovery, we saw a huge recovery, huge job losses in leisure and hospitality. That has since come back, but we're still kind of net negative on this. Where we've seen job gains, again, when we're above zero, that means we're above that 0 million mark. Those are jobs that we have more of now than before. And that's in professional business services, trade, transportation, and utilities. And so that's pretty good. But as you notice in this situation, it is a very uneven economy. And if we look at between October and November, I was looking for one specific factor here. As we look into sort of indications for the strength of the economy going forward, I wanted to see a bit more information on retail trade, retail spending. Fascinating retail trade actually at the very bottom. We lost about 30,000 retail jobs between October and November. Why is that an important indicator of the economy? Because usually we see the opposite trajectory as we approach winter. People spend a lot of money. And as a consequence, during the holiday season, as a consequence, historically, a lot of retail would pick up jobs, they'd hire people. And that's very fascinating to watch, because retail has been one of the factors. We had $5 trillion of stimulus spending. A lot of people had money, a lot of people were injected with cash flows. And as a consequence, you saw this growth in expenditure on retail sales that followed pretty neatly. And now it's kind of leveled off. And also you're looking at now people are like, well, wait a second, there's some issues here. And I'll also go into some personal finance issues here. We actually have a large number of people who are needing emergency credit for one reason or another. This is a good question. Anonymous, good question again. Most of the job gains have been crappy poverty wage jobs. Exactly right. And so when you look at the job gains here, you see leisure and hospitality, not a high paying sector. Of a source of note in this regard, though, is that if we look at wage growth is not tracking like particularly high, and it's falling behind inflation. And it's always been behind inflation this year, I should say. If I go to the most recent BLS jobs report, and I have to double check that number here. But when I click out the employment situation summary and go down to kind of our wages here, yeah, exactly. So wage growth is sector-based often, and we end up with a vastly different wage growth experienced by which sector that you're in. The only sector that did receive double-digit increases in wage growth has been leisure and hospitality because of said labor shortages. But again, you're looking at wages which can't buy you, I mean, when you go from $9 to $13 an hour or something else, it sounds like an incredible percentage rate. But again, it's not matching the sort of desired demand and otherwise sort of ability for people to actually earn a living wage, which is a completely separate question. And so as a consequence, there's still a ways to go. A lot of businesses in general have been hesitant, unable to adjust to participation rates and adjust their financials, I should say, not participation rates, to sort of a higher wage environment. More is being expected of fewer people. There's a lot of questions here that need to be addressed. So I really appreciate that. Yep, Sean says so-called Mick jobs, pretty alluding to the McDonald's, always sunshine and rainbows. They're not, as you point out, those high tech, the high sort of paying tech field jobs that people imagined that they were going to get. Those numbers have been much more flat. Now, if labor participation rate, this is interesting. So Albert says, so are we missing the shovel-ready union-supported jobs? And that's a really good question, because when you think about the union supporting jobs, we have a very uneven union distribution in this country. We have some fields like education where it appears more frequently. We have just a general sense of a lack of unions in a lot of places. In some places like Starbucks trying to unionize at the franchise level and trying to get more attention together. So if labor participation rate keeps declining, will we see a lesser impact if people lose their jobs? That's interesting. So the question, what an interesting question that is. So let's bring this out. So hypothetically speaking, if labor participation rate goes down, as it will demographically, we're getting older as a society, will we see a lesser impact if people lose their jobs? You know, that's lesser impact. That's a really good question. So I see your point, like if we're looking at the amount of people who are employed, but there's a few things in general worth noting. Although growing much, much more slowly than we have in the past, we are still growing in population. And as a consequence, the amount of people who are employed is still higher in a relative sense than back it was in 2000, in a literal sense, than it was in 2008 or in a previous recession in 1990 or 2000 or in the early 80s. And so that human impact is going to continue to rise in proportion with our population and labor force. And then you have another question, which is, of course, the stuff that this wouldn't pick up. So for instance, let's say that you retire and you go on Social Security and you have just enough income to get by month to month. You're trying as hard as you can to get through a situation, trying the best that you can to kind of get by on this. And let's say you can't afford to. So you start looking for a job. You're a senior citizen looking for a second career, another job in another part of the workforce. You're going to re-enter the workforce. And when we have adverse economic situations, those jobs also go away for those seniors who might want to re-enter. And that becomes a cost that we have to account for as well. And so there's never a real winner in this scenario when it comes to job losses. Oh, Anonymous says many tech companies have announced layoffs. How will this impact the numbers? This is true. This is a good question. So you're looking at tech companies out there right now, and they've announced layoffs already. And in our last month's presentation, I called this the canary in the coal mine effect. Since the tech sector is much more responsive to economic changes, both good and bad. Why is that? Because in the tech sector, you are forward-looking. When you think about earnings promises, or you're selling your business to a VC or doing other things, and something else is happening, you're making projections about the take-up of your business based on a very rosy economic model. And if you think of everything in the future becomes one finance. The F in finance is about future earnings, future growth, future profits. All of that discounted back to today produces the value of a company. And so if the company were to say drop in value, or earnings weren't expected, or we're looking at situations where, hey, guess what? Face Meta's, earnings are not going to be what we thought it was because of their investment decision. That reduces their entire forward projection. That means that they have to start thinking about things like cutting jobs in response to these infrastructure changes. So this does spread, and I will anticipate that instead of being located into this tech sector right now, my projection is, especially 3 to 6 months down the line, we're going to see somewhat more widespread job losses. And it's just the first indicator for adverse activity in the economy happens in the tech sector first because of its very nature. Oh, good. So we had some good news here. All right, so I'll go through this. The unemployment rate won't go up as much. Okay, yeah. So will it not go up as much? That's interesting. So unemployment, of course, is always based upon the number of possible workers, people who are also looking for jobs that are counted as part of the labor force. So it's possible you can reduce it to zero if you count every unemployed worker as not being part of the job market, which is really, really interesting. And that's true too. Oh, I love you brought that up. Chat GPI, and other AI. What's the damage we can expect to jobs? Huge. I'm coming from the education industry. When I talked to Anonymous about this, Anonymous, that's a good point. So you saw, of course, in the last couple of weeks, you saw something that's really swept education and been the source of many a board meeting on my end, looking at things like Chat GPI, other things, and the way we do education. Now, if we look at this, questions about AI in the world of education, we end up in a situation where AI is going to rapidly progress to a point as it learns, and it's not like, and think of it from I'll use one field, education, as an example. Students can go on there and get a pretty good answer to the questions using an AI chatbot that I ask in my tests in my graduate student program. And it's enough for credit. If I didn't know any better, if I thought it was AI, I would consider that a violation of academic integrity. But because it's very hard for me to pick that up by nature, it's something that becomes very easy to do. Likewise, if you're a faculty member, if you're a tenured faculty member like me and other people, you spend a lot of your time researching. You're researching future researching, creating articles that eventually try to be published. We are a hop, skip, and a jump from AI, from me entering a research question and providing it with data, and then the AI developing a research article that is as good or better than something that I could write. And so certainly the entire economics of this field has to change. Now, here's the hard part, right? So there's a few ways we can argue against this or for this, or one way to kind of look at this in a different way. And so I think organizations will respond to things like Chat GPI in a very interesting way. So education, there's a couple ways we can do this. One is we focus on that networking, that experiential side a lot more than what we're doing now, that sort of learning process where you go in and memorize hard facts and sort of have to recite them. That's going to be very tough to justify. But on the other side of this, you have things like you have network engagement, you have soft skills, you have something where you're doing a lot of work, and then your job is to interpret that work. The nature of what we educate on has to change. And likewise, the roles that people play within their organizations will have to change. So I'm not a Malthusian. I'm not like and that's a follower of Thomas Malthus, who, he wrote a lot of theory about, say, population growth and sort of the end of, and how technology will adversely affect people's jobs. I think a lot of those jobs will be replaced, but the nature of those jobs will change fundamentally. And if we think about this, and this is one word, and this is important for today's conversation, when we think about the question of AI and the economy, think about the word, and I'm going to borrow, if you from Matthew Iglesias, the question of de-skilling. De-skilling is an economic theory where it shows that, so going back in time, the advent of the Industrial Revolution, I could go and have somebody build, I don't know, a desk for me, and that person would be a craftsperson. They would be an expert at being able to identify the wood, to evaluate it. They have to acquire all these different skills, and maybe it's a typewriter, maybe it's something a little bit more technical too. And they could craft this for me. It would take a long time. It would be very inefficient, but they could probably do it. Then you had the Industrial Revolution come along. People would come together and make individual pieces of this. So as a worker on this assembly line, I don't possess anywhere near the skill of that skilled craftsman, but I am very good at doing, moving from step A to step B. That's de-skilling. And I think education, other fields, you're going to go through this field of de-skilling, where computers are going to do stuff that's better than we can, but our job will be to interpret what those things are without necessarily knowing how to do them. And so I don't know if it depends on your viewpoint on this, but that could be a dark view of society or a bad one. And this is really, really interesting. So I appreciate your perspective on this too. And I'll answer that live there. To your comment on there too, ethics has no place in an oligarch's never-ending greed. They're looking for ways to automate everything. That is actually true. And the question is how do people add value in that context? Oligarchies are fine. Usually free markets work pretty well, but they do tend towards oligarchy, which is why regulation comes in to break that up. So I would say that a smart way to look at this would be to consider looking at regulation, looking at how we might approach that from a practical perspective and designing it effectively, which is always the silver lining here. So another economic trend I saw the other day was 6 million plus middle-aged men are also missing from the job market. Some are caring for family or doing their own jobs. Many more are simply jobless. It's a really sobering article to read. Thank you for that. And I know there was some discussion about this. I appreciate that. Google has yet to lay off its employees, and that's a really good point too. Albert, a lot of the tech stuff isn't something that we're seeing here. Anonymous asks, what is a free market? A hypothetical market where buyers and sellers meet and do things. We all have versions of this. Different sectors do it better than others. Some sectors it's not effective. Where we can't have it are things like, say, in utilities. So for instance, it's not practical to build 25 different utility lines parallel to one another, but it is something. Oh, hey, Sean, good to see you there. I see everyone in there. Now I'm getting there. Ethical questions for us to determine at what point is allowable. Yes, Angelica, absolutely correct. Thank you, Albert, for the link to, I'm going through the list here. I like to think that creative destruction. You're asking, Anonymous, don't ask rhetorical questions of the answer question. I know. What is that? I always, I don't know. I can't read. I appreciate the spirit of it, though. Coders, publishers, media specialists, this is what happens with AI. AI will augment our jobs and be complementary in nature. That's also the positive hope too. 6 million men are at the pubs. This is good. Buying craft beer, our tax money, and they're on the dole. Wow, this conversation has taken a dark link. I appreciate your participation. This is really fun. All right, anyway, sunshine, rainbows, unicorns. Let's keep chugging along. So uneven economy, where did we see job growth in the last month? Let's break down to October and November. Retail trade dropped, of course, to our point, but we did see gains again in leisure and hospitality and the government. Oh, thank you so much, Angelica. So government work, other services, construction, information, manufacturing, all reporting gains. Manufacturing, of course, one worry is, of course, with the strength of the dollar, it's very hard to sell things overseas. Manufacturing is still benefiting from that onshoring phenomenon. Labor supply right now, though, according to Apollo, they estimate us we're about 4 million workers lower than a pre-pandemic trend. We'll fight about all these numbers in economics. Some will say, well, it's not appropriate to use that in an area of lower population growth. But at the same time, it is sobering, and that's one reason we're lacking a lot of low-wage jobs in particular areas. And as a consequence, the whole economy feels that. So one thing that would be beneficial to this is to really think about how we can optimize and improve our immigration. You have several. Are you, Angelica? That's very interesting. Is that a nice question, or are you trying to find me which one he is? Right here. Okay. Let's see. So Riley White, Reilly, White. LinkedIn profile for White. Oh yes. That's part of the mystery. Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn too. Are you linking? Okay, that's fun. That's good. Has this become very personal? Does anybody have any questions? Are you concerned? Are you concerned? I hope I did not anger anyone beyond belief. Good. Thank you, Angelica. Of course, I'm always pleased to connect. You're always welcome to find me on LinkedIn, all those other places. Sean Riley found me in all manner of social media. Now he's there. So thanks, Sean. I missed you in the last sessions. It's good to have you. Summary. So the true recession is almost here. So let's get down to brass tacks here. Where are we going with this? Riley, I just reported you on the data that everybody knows. So the question on all of your minds, or some of your minds, or some of half of your minds, is there going to be a recession next year, and what do I do about it? So you've read the articles. Bloomberg had their odds of a recession near 100%. Here's why. So the true recession is almost here. And when we think about economic data, we have a lot of data that we have that's kind of the here and now. A lot of the data is lagged. We also have a lot of data that is what we call leading economic indicators, leading economic index, the LEI, and the coincident economic index, which kind of tracks to right now. This data right here in front of you is about a month and a half old, but for most of this is basically the same. So across the level where we are now, we got a lot of colors here. Green is good, yellow is it's fair, it's equal, red is bad news bears. So when we think about level and we think about trend, one thing is right now we're a little bit weak in a few areas, things like building permits, and obviously the stock market has not had a stellar year. On the other side of this, we expect this trend to worsen or be stable in most of these categories. And that's one of the reasons that we look ahead to these things to sort of ascertain what's going to happen. Now, you've heard a lot about, say, why is it this way? Why did it happen this way? Continued inflation and a strong job market means the Fed is going to continue monetary tightening. And they came out today with a 50 basis point increase. What does that mean? So kind of break it down, and I know we covered this before, but if you haven't, this is your first webinar with me or something else. So one thing is the Federal Reserve has control over one interest rate, really, and that's called the discount rate. That's overnight lending to large banks, and they're the banker's bank. And so when large banks need capital exchanges all the time, they lend to them overnight, and that's called the discount rate. So the Fed raises and lowers the discount rate in response to certain economic activity, because what happens is when they raise and lower this rate, this has a effect on the economy in other rates in the economy and the effect on the economy overall. Another example, so when we have a high inflationary environment, what raising the rates does is it makes investing more expensive. When you make investing more expensive, people invest less, they hold on to their money instead of spending it and generating new money. That has the effect of lowering inflation, but it also lowers economic activity. And if you raise rates too high, you put us into a recession. On the other side of that question, you have another thing. Let's say you're in an economic doldrums, you're in a recession. Fed's going to cut rates. They're going to reduce the cost of doing investment. That makes a lot of economic projects more tenable, more viable. And so these companies start lending money, spending money, and people get higher, job market goes up, and we get out of a recession. That's sort of the essence of that 30s Keynesian economic period as applied to today. Now, so when we think about this in the recession now, and we think about how the likelihood of a recession is going to change, the Fed has raised rates faster than they have in the last 40 years. That's a significant fact. And what that is we're seeing those ripple effects in asset prices across the board. Asset prices include things like houses, but they include things like stocks, and they include other things that are tangible and less tangible in the marketplace right now. Because rates are more expensive. When rates are more expensive, asset prices kind of come down. I had a little bit of a debate. I talked to one of my colleagues in the field. He's like, oh, these are just back to normal rates, normal mortgage rates, normal prices. And I'm like, normal is a relative term, and there's no economic period that is exactly like one other economic period for one reason or another. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. But even if that were true, even if I were to argue that these rates are higher, things like mortgages, I mean, obviously, it's been expensive in the Bay Area for a long time, but when you have higher rates or higher mortgage rates overall, it makes maintaining those asset prices very hard. Having a long extended period of low rates incentivize asset prices to rise. And so if you expect rates to be high for the long run, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have really expensive houses and really, really high rates because the economy won't support it. And so that's why you're seeing this really weird adjustment period that's going on sort of right now. So Sue asked, question for me, what would be your estimate of the length, duration of the recession? How many quarters? Oh, we're going to get to these things too. And I'll kind of explain to you a few things of when we see it. So regarding the length, depth, and nature of any recession, the response to that is really going to be based on what we do as a result of that recession. So I can tell you right now when we expect to see it and why we expect to see it. But unfortunately, when we look at how deep it can go or how long it will last, it's going to be dependent on the response of the Fed. It'll be dependent on the response of Congress. And I'm looking at this right now, and I don't see, we don't have the appetite right now for the same sort of spending that we did last or 2 years ago now to get us out of that recession. But that was a very unique circumstance. So I think there will be some type of bill passed that will encourage, but it's difficult. It's too preliminary to guess because we're betting on things that haven't really occurred yet. But I'll kind of go into why some of these indicators are more indicative than another in a little bit. So I love that question, Sue. So after matching a half century of 3.5% national employment in September, higher rates are going to take a toll on jobs in 2023. Real estate prices are adversely impacted by higher mortgage rates and a weakening economic picture. That is going to be true. Another thing as well. Okay, Riley, I don't believe you about this thing about the economy. Let's go see this thing. Ooh, Anonymous, this is a really good comment. Wish Fed would reduce their MBS on their books, better way than manipulating the rates. So when we think about mortgage-backed securities, which Anonymous is referring to, so as part of the sort of, and I would argue this goes back to 2008, but in a real sense, in the couple years immediately prior to this, prior to the pandemic, the Fed started taking on or buying a huge amount of mortgage-backed securities. This had the effect of effectively propping up the asset markets and housing, making housing more expensive in a lot of areas of the country. And you're right, they acquired trillions of dollars of mortgage-backed securities. And they're looking at this, and I know they're being cautious on their end because they're worried that if they drop all those on the balance sheet and flood the market with mortgage-backed securities, it might crash the mortgage-backed security market. And likewise, they can't continue buying them because that artificially supports the market. market. And so then you have to figure out what they're going to do with it. And it makes sense to gradually reduce them, get them off their balance sheets. But I know they'll be a little bit more cautious than we might think they should be, just because they're worried about the adverse effect on the asset industry. Housing, if we look at different variables on housing as just an industry represents 10 to 15% of GDP of this country. So it's a huge industry, and they're keen on keeping it up, and they're also keen on on not letting it fall too quickly, too abruptly. A good link for the Cleveland Fed as well. Thank you, Anonymous. Predicted growth. That's really fun here. Look at that yield. Oh yeah, that's great. Great link there too. Thank you, Anonymous. Excellent work. So in this one here, another way to look at this, and I want to make sure I get this here. Yep, Albert's list. Yep, cost of capital. Very good. But in this example here, this is what we call leading economic indicators. And what they do is in this year-to-year index of leading economic indicators, we can track. The idea being is once it goes negative, usually within 3 months to 9 months, we get a recession. And right now, leading economic indicators, this is a chart as of 10/31, but if we go back further today, it's still right up there. We still have a lot of data that comes out quarterly, so this is not going to be perfect, but it shows you basically we're within a couple quarters of getting that in. And so if you follow a few theorists online, other places, some argue March, some argue May as being likely times when we'll see a real impact of negative growth too. So that's the specific timeline. The depth of this is yet to be determined. It depends entirely on this. And because the Fed is still contractionary, they're still raising rates, I expect this number will continue to go down for a little bit. And until we get the next slew of quarterly economic numbers, I don't know how deep it will get, but it's not going to be good. So households' need for cash. Another reason we're not really sunshine and rainbows right now. Hardship withdrawals, meaning that people who are withdrawing because of absolute hardship in the economy have reached an all-time high in 2022. Just think about that. Think about the hardship withdrawals. You have this thing, you go to a mall, go to somewhere else, you see retail spending, you see things happening. But the reality for many people is we're also seeing increases in credit card debt. We're seeing increases in financing. We're seeing increases across the board of people engaging in hardship. This is a sure sign that we're entering an adverse economic phase. So if we look at the share of 401k participants with a loan or withdraw in the given month, almost 0.5% are financing their living standards with hardship withdrawals in a given month. That is an extraordinary big number. And even if we look at the history of 401ks in this country, so as a sense of this, before 1980, until they were legalized in the late 70s, and in 1980, when the first one was created, no one had a 401k. About a third of Americans had pensions, we had other things. And then 401ks became legal, and that shifted the onus of financial responsibility and knowledge from, say, the corporations or the people who are managing money for their employees onto the people themselves without actually providing them the requisite literacy training. And so when you enter this situation, you're entering this sort of very difficult period. And although now in the last 40 years, we've seen an explosion, most people have 401ks when they think about retirement in that level. And we're seeing hardship withdrawals increasing the highest rated levels. And this was a concern for me. And especially considering that your trajectory is strongly upward, even when we normalize it month to month and smooth it out a bit. And I'm very interested in how this will happen. So I think what we're going to see is we're seeing a lot of people experiencing economic stress, a lot of people living beyond their means. And as a consequence, these budgets will be affected and people will be affected and bankruptcies are going to happen. But we haven't reached that point yet. We're seeing the tip of the iceberg. We're seeing an economy in transition. And that's sort of the issues that we're looking at. An inflation update as well. Let's go switch gears into inflation since we're 40 minutes into this. 7.1% in falling. This was more than expected. Consensus put us about 7.3% year-on-year inflation. But good news is we're down to 7.1. Bad news is it's still freaking 7.1%. Inflation cooled more than expected, but rents accelerated to the highest level we've seen in 4 decades. Now we know economic indicators are lagging at times, and I'll explain a little bit more about rents and why we think that'll start coming off in a little bit in my real estate section. Service inflation, 3.9%. That was driven heavily by rents, but also things like dental work and sports tickets. Garbage collection became more expensive. And of course, Albert pointed this out to me as a key point in his finding of inflation, looking at this. Inflation, grocery-related inflation jumped 12%. And you've probably seen the news, notable increases across the country. And this is a graphic from NPR. Lettuce up almost 9%. That's incredible, actually. And of course, that's related to a lot of the growth and the troubling growth in the Salinas Valley, among other places. So looking at this is a really, really big deal. And Albert asks, how do you think the credit crunch bankruptcies will compare versus what we saw in 2009? That's a good question. You know, we always say there's no such thing. Every recession is a different flavor, different cause, different sort of issue with it. 2009 was so skewed towards the housing market. We had a lot of more people. We had we had this weird perfect storm of incredibly undercapitalized banks. I used to be a banker. I was a banker in 2008 before I was an academic, before I went back to PhD school, which I went to because of the financial crisis. So I used to be a banker back in the day. And we used to have these very in-depth conversations about the nature of loan and other things in our economy. We didn't understand a lot of stuff. I had a monocle, I had a top hat, Albert. I just sat there like the Monopoly man, and I would go, "You don't get a loan." I was like, it's a wonderful life. Oh, Mr. Bailey, it's like Jimmy Stewart, and It's a Wonderful Life, talking to Mr. Potter. And I would yell George Bailey, and I'd take away people's houses. No, I wasn't that kind of banker. But this was a really, really, really big issue back in 2008. We had a bunch of people with undercapitalized banks. We had people taking on adjustable rate mortgages of questionable impact and quality. We had the Fed increasing rates rapidly, and those adjustable rate mortgages adjusting so people could no longer afford them. The real estate market tanked. That's not the same right now. We're seeing this. The Fed is trying to deflate the asset bubble gradually. They're raising rates, but they're paying attention to prices, and they're trying to make these assets kind of calm down a bit, kind of stop their growth a little bit with higher prices. And Powell, obviously, from his little talk today, Powell went out and said, we're going to increase again. We're going up 50 basis points, half a percentage point in rates, and we're going to increase again as we go along. And the markets were like, whoa, wait a second, I thought you were done. And so the markets had this adjustment in response to this. Now, when we think about this, the Fed's going to come out and they're going to make their adjustments based on the data that they have. I feel that their data, based on their economists, they feel confident that right now, the risk of a recession, or the most pertinent things, they believe they still can, I think, reduce the asset bubble in a substantial way as to not cause widespread unemployment. The Fed has a dual mandate: keep unemployment very low, around 2%, keep inflation around 2%, and keep inflation around 2%, and keep employment at near maximum. They have near maximum employment, but inflation is high. So to reduce inflation, they've raised rates, and those rates are going to come down. That means probably, this is really interesting. I actually think, will the Dow fall like a rock? Futures are up a little bit. There you go. I think right now people had the initial reaction, and we saw this initial reaction is that the markets were like, looked at the futures, went down a bit. I think people will come to their senses and they'll look at this going forward. I don't day trade on Fed spending. I know it's on Fed decision making. But I think there's a lot of sobering data coming up. And I think the market will sober up a bit if earnings also decline. And we have some other data suggest that also might happen. So there's a lot of things that are looking forward into this. But inflation right now, apart from a few individual things, increases in the last month in things like men's suits and haircuts being offset by things like decreases in airfare and car rental and gasoline. Renting a car in Oakland, it seems relatively cheap. I was impressed, which is surprising. But maybe it's not really a car. Maybe I inadvertently got something much worse. But I wish I had the extra cash to buy puts and calls on QQQ, SPY, and DIA the week the Fed makes decisions. Back in the day, this is really interesting. There is this, back in, remember when Apple, in the Steve Jobs era, Apple, they'd come out and they do their end of year, September, not end of year, but they do their kind of September product event. And there's a trading strategy built around that product event that they did, right? So, and everyone knew that Apple was going to release something else, a new version of an iPhone. And so the price of Apple stock would go up and up and up. And then when they actually made the actual event happen, the stock price would go down. But then in the period afterwards, the between 2 week and 3 month period afterwards, the stock price increased significantly, and traders moved on this. And eventually it was this window that became publicized. And as you sort of expose trading strategies, those windows close and they no longer exist. But it was kind of like a surefire estimate. Buy the rumor, sell the news, says Sean. Very good. Look at this. Very good. Buy the rumor, sell the news. We were seeing it both ways, though. We saw a lot of people selling the rumor and buying the news. We saw the opposite, but it was interesting to see how the market played that out. For Elon Musk's appearance on SNL, it was buy the rumor, sell the appearance. I know, he's everywhere these days. It's been, Elon Musk, fascinating to watch. The takeover of Twitter, followed by his lukewarm public appearance in the Bay Area the other day. But only 60%. So here's another thing that we like a little bit of this. If you look at the actual CPI components, and we were tracking more, how many of the consumer price index components are increasing more than 4% annually. It's as a percentage of this has dropped to near 60%, still a majority, but this is good news that inflation is becoming less widespread across asset classes. And this is really, really encouraging. This is called a diffusion index of the CPI. What did my management colleagues say about this? Best part about academics are you won't find a more surefire place that would argue against Elon's management of this. And for all of his metrics aside and for making it happen, and there's a lot of people's jobs, many of whom I imagine are Albert's List practitioners or part of Albert's List that may have lost their job at Twitter lately or something else. And those 3,500 people as they disseminate through the area and other tech sectors. The question is, of course, is will the big tech layoffs allow people to adjust and get jobs in other smaller or other companies that don't have those things? And right now, and this is the weird part, we haven't seen the data hit. So I'll go over the October numbers in the Bay Area, but that'd be very interesting to see. But most management would be very critical of this. He's violating a lot of the fundamental principles of what it is. While he is getting the marketing out there, there is some concern. But if you look at this, and so what does that mean specifically? What is the nature of that toxicity? And I would defer to my management colleagues on this per se. But in the question of this, is it true as a communication medium? Twitter has a lot of tremendous use as a communication medium. And it has a lot of use for, getting charts and data. And if I need something to explain to a student or something else, I can find it on the internet and often through places like Twitter, where you can follow some really incredible people. So that's a really, really interesting phenomenon. Yes, and to Albert's point, I think the unemployment rate is remaining steady right now because tech companies are giving very generous severance packages that don't terminate employment until months later. That's also true. So you're looking at the March-April window where you see a huge spike in unemployment as people start looking for those jobs again. That makes sense to me. The question is, though, of course, if we look at it as a and let me see, and there's some cool graphics here that I can try to grab here. I always like to look at, I think this is one of the Albert's List classics, the layoffs .fyi on layoffs and FYI in the charts here. We had, the good news is we've saw, well, actually there isn't really good news. It's more bad news, but it could be worse, question mark. So if I grab this chart real quick and I'll dump it in here from some tech layoffs again from layoffs.fyi, some sense of this. We're looking at this right now. We see the employees laid off. We see the physical numbers based on the announcements that were made. That stuff, of course, to Albert's point, doesn't fall through to the data for months later. That's important. That's what we issue with these lags. And we look at the tech layoffs since COVID-19. And we're cruising with some very consistently high levels here in this quarter. And this quarter 4 of 2022 is already shaping up to look as bad or worse than it is already worse in employees laid off than the second quarter of 2020. And so that becomes a very critical juncture here. And the question is, where are people going to land and where will people get jobs? And this is very, very hard to see because this is typically what we see prior to a recessionary environment. So Meta gave 17 weeks of severance. DoorDash, that's very good. Gave its workers till February 28th, gives Visa H-1B workers the runway to find something new. The question is to your ability, are we going to get that data across? And that's a good Albert's List poll, actually. Albert, if you can collect data on that, that would be very informative. That would be we could co-author a paper on this anonymously. But it'd be really interesting. That'll be interesting to see how that comes out, but it is going to come. Delayed indicators, rents versus used cars, another thing we're talking about. Rents took out a huge portion of this CPI. We look at rent as a function of CPI, it has soared to these levels, but I'll explain why. A lot of this was going to come down very shortly, while all items are decreasing. Meanwhile, used cars looks kind of like a gentleman's hat from a bygone era. Used cars drastically increased with supply chain issues in 2021 in price, and then they've since fallen kind of off a cliff, and they're now declining month to month, which is good news if you are in the car market. So many new people broke into tech the last 2 years. My presumption is that many people won't be lucky to stay in tech, and I'm wondering where they will land instead. That's true. That said, though, for things like this, and I want to give some examples here. I sent Albert a link to a job. A lot of my students work for national labs and other places. There's an unending. They can't find enough people for things like cybersecurity and technical analytics, and so there are subjects in the field which I think, in one way, I think is optimistic for many people with specialized interests. Everything from programming all the way into some, especially into cyber and other security measures, is that with your experience in a tech company, that bodes very well across the country and across other places as people experience and examine work. And the other side of that, though, on the other side in education, a lot of firms we're cutting back. A lot of colleges are cutting back on non-specific cybersecurity programs, other things as well, based on saturation in the marketplace. So it is interesting to note this, and this has been a really interesting phenomenon that we haven't observed yet, is in this era of promise, sort of what it looks like as it matures. And I still think that having experience on the table is going to carry you far in this round, and outside of, say, the traditional tech fields, into other places. So I always encourage people to consider themselves adaptable and try to continue to be adaptable. So in this situation, one thing to look at, another way to look at these charts, and this is another fun one, is let's look at October 2022 on the left, November 22 on the right. These are CPI. This is the amount of price changes we've seen month to month. Dark red means price increases at a big level. Dark blue means price decreases. So back in October, we were looking at increases in motor fuel and energy and food and cost and shelter. And as we move towards November, that calculus has changed. Energy has gone back down again. Shelter increases have become proportionately slower in growth. Used cars and trucks now forming a bigger piece of that negative rate. And each of these boxes is proportional. That represents the size of the impact contribution to the sort of parent figure here. And so they are relative in this sense. So medical care services dropping, used cars prices dropping, food at home, though, that source of increase is here. But the good news for that is that relative to the total contribution of CPI, it isn't huge, which means that it's still limited to specific things. So one thing as well, year-on-year CPI, if I look at the 8th month forward projection, what the markets are saying CPI is going to be, it's at 2.5%. Other indicators, inflation expectations, never a good thing to look at. Bring a bunch of economists in the room and finance people. We're always going to project the wrong answer. But right now is that most expectations are now dropping precipitously in response to the Fed's action. This is good, but it's not any means certain. It highly depends on how the next year goes. But I think we're going to get over this recession hurdle. So when you think of rents, and I know I had a complaint a couple months ago, they're like, Riley, you don't care enough about San Jose, the largest city in the Bay Area, Riley. What's your problem? And so I highlighted San Jose here, and this is a shout out to the people of San Jose. Really, I appreciate it. It's the thinking person's Fresno. I appreciate every aspect about San Jose. I love that it's there. I love that it exists. No, but so this is a very interesting thing, and you've seen this or may have heard about this. And obviously, one of the things as well is because the real estate market in San Francisco and the Bay Area as a whole is so expensive, you didn't see a increase that was proportional to the places we saw in other places. It didn't make things affordable, but you didn't see that asset price increase because it was kind of already there. And what we've seen, though, is that also the Bay Area is one of the places where we saw first the rents start to decline, other things start to decline. And that's a functional representation of how asset prices are being affected in the economy. Across this, any blue circle here means that rents are decreasing. This is the apartment list end of November recent report. Across the board, with the exception of, I think, Concord right there in the light yellow, increasing steadily. Most places are dropping in price. Okay, still incredibly expensive, but they're dropping. Oh, that sounds exciting. So in San Jose, for instance, the month-to-month rent growth was about minus 1.8%, and they're basically flat since March 2020, up about 1.9%. Now, if I look at the slowest metro rent growth, if we've seen since March 2020, number one is San Francisco with about a 3% drop since the beginning of the pandemic. That's pretty good. A lot of other large cities are also experiencing roughly flatline gains. So the question is what does this mean for the future? Real estate depends on supply and demand, and it depends on a lot of other things, including the ability for people to pay really, really high mortgages when rates are really, really high. And so as a function of the 10-year bond rate being really high, mortgages rates shot up drastically, although these have since leveled off and have started to decline somewhat. I think as long as the 10-year bond remains pretty high, they're going to continue to be high. And that means that asset prices will continue to feel this pressure. Now, this doesn't mean you'll start deflating. You're not going to see an 80% drop in real estate in the next year in the Bay Area, so you can suddenly afford that dream home in Atherton or something, because it's like because suddenly the prices have dropped so significantly. Unfortunately, it's going to remain high just because of scarcity, and there isn't really a lot of places to build, but also there's prohibitive zoning restrictions. Housing supply is incredibly low. To Sean's point, and I was asked this, I was in front of the Santa Fe City Council in New Mexico, answering a very wonderful set of economic questions they were asking me. Because Santa Fe, of course, we're like a little slice of California, New Mexico, when you look at our zoning policies and other things. And we also have a similarly high price, not as high as the Bay Area, but we have high prices for our state because of sort of the amount of people who want to live here versus the ratio of available units. You can maintain high prices as a virtue of low inventory. Like if just from normal churn, if there are very few people willing to sell their homes, prices can remain high in an area. There's nothing to say that they have to drop significantly. Price functionality is based on transactions actually happening. And if there's an absence of transactions, I mean, prices can remain high. To make a market work, you got to have people want to sell stuff at the market, and that's not happening. And that's going to be tough to say. It's going to be weird how that calculus changes in response to sort of economic changes in time. So rent moderation, we're going to see moderation in rents showing up in the CPI, but not right. And it didn't happen this month. And here's why. So if we look at a whole bunch of data here, Zillow, Yardi, CoStar, all these alternative measures, month-to-month pace of alternative rent measures, these prices are coming down. But because we're smooth, and think of all the lack data, think of all the people who made their apartment decisions coming up now, making them leaving an apartment, entering a new contract now, something like that. CPI rent is right about the apex of where we expect it'll be. I think it'll still remain high in our December numbers and January numbers, but then it's going to start tapering off because of just this massive increase we saw through 2021 and 2022. That's where it is. But that is now shifted into CPI. Excuse me, that lag is shifted into CPI. That CPI is going to come down, and that's going to further the deceleration of inflation. So bring it on down to the Bay breakdown. Unemployment steady, about 2.6%. Now, unemployment data for the Bay Area, and again, San Jose person's like, why don't you have San Jose in here? And I'm like, no, I won't. I care about it very deeply. But in the Bay Area, as defined as part of the Bay Area, San Francisco, Oakland, you got your East Bay, you got your peninsula. San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward, the labor force is very steady and unemployment is very good. But we've seen increases in very interesting areas from September to October. Numbers that were flat for a long period of time. I'll give you an example here, like professional and business services have increased 7,000, but also education, which was pretty flat around 370, jumped to 379,000 in employment. Things like leisure and hospitality, that leveled off, but that shot up another 3,000. Government, which has always been kind of choppy anyway, increased about 4,000 jobs. And so the Bay Area is reporting a lot of very interesting data on this, but none of this, to your point and to the point of the people here who are attending this, reflects the data of the new layoffs in a very meaningful way, nor will it for months ahead of time. So when you look at the information sector as a whole, and to the earlier point that the jobs being created aren't necessarily jobs in certain sectors, information has basically been flatlined and it remains flatlined for a very long period of time, which is a huge sector in the Bay Area and involves 148,000 people, almost 150,000 people that work in this sector. And so, we're going to see a few things happen. So I'm going to go through here. And you asked, there was a really good question. And going back to Sue's much earlier question involving the, questions around whether or not when the recession would happen and how deep it will be. There was a great thread that I'm going to find, and I refer to this because it was very excellent in the way that it presented in the information that I'm about to go over. But I want to make sure, it was some time ago, and I have to go dig it up here. Yes, here it is. So if I look through here, and I'm going to grab this. This is from, if you want to follow somebody fun on Twitter who has a lot of good data. This is some data from Macro Alf, a very fun guy to follow. You don't have to agree with everything, but it does provide interesting data. So Exhibit 1. Global credit impulse, negative year-on-year earnings in quarters 1, 2, and 3. Basically, the inflation-adjusted percentage of GDP, as we look at global credit, has been falling. S&P 500 EPS growth is falling. We put these two things together. This means that we'll be in a spot of bad earnings, bad credit, and this suggests a more severe recession if we engage that number. If we look at the leading economic indicator, the same version, a slightly different version of the chart I already gave you. This has a lead time of about 7 months before a recession. When we hit negative in October. In August was the first time, I guess, we technically were negative. So the recession would be then in March 2023 based on this data. And this doesn't suggest how bad it will be, but we're going to need more data to determine that. And there's a few things here. We think about the housing market rule. And in the housing market rule, and this looks at a recession towards perhaps May 2023. What this does, according to the SAM rule, SAHM, a recession starts when the 3-month moving average of the U.S. unemployment rate rises by 50 basis points. To give you a sense of that, that's not a lot more than where we are now. That would be something around 4.2%-ish. That would bring us to that level. That would be when the recession begins. That's a few months of bad job market to make that happen, and it kind of along the same lines of when we think the tech layoffs will hit. It'll be about that same period. And then of course you have this is the forecast for new orders. When we think about looking ahead at, say, business activity in the next 6 months to a year, we usually see that if we go back in 40 years from now, the new orders drop below 15. When they drop below 15 for more than 2 months, a recession happens within 7 months. On average, 7 or 8 months on average, this would put it towards May. So businesses start projecting less. So are you saying, Albert says, despite the NBR's indication that GDP rose 2.9% in Q3, that we are still in a recession? No, Albert, I'm projecting a recession for next year. No. And do you expect Q4 to show a contraction? I do not expect Q4 to show a restraint. I'm going to, for the purposes of this argument, let me be clear about this. I don't think NBER is not a technical thing. I'm looking ahead to when a recession will happen and how bad it will be. And right now, a lot of the data shows that we don't know for sure how bad it will be. Some say it will be kind of bad. Some say it will be fairly moderate. But the lead time somewhere in the March to May vicinity in most of these characteristics. And that's kind of where I'm going with this. So there's a bunch of data out here that suggests bad news, and negative growth in the future. And that's sort of where we're going with this. So right now it's good. I expect Q4 to be pretty good. I expect Q3 was positive. Q4 will also be positive. And the Fed's going to continue to raise rates for 1 or 2 more cycles. But then we will, it seems, inevitably be in a recession because we are entering this transitionary period. The job market's going to be worse, and it's going to start getting worse. And it's going to start getting worse in more than just the information technology sector. It's going to be in other places as well. So the 2023 recession, yeah, that's good. Juice up for the 2024 presidential. That's right. So if you're looking to vote for Albert, now is your time. How about Q1 2023? Q1 2023. So we're thinking right now, this is all that delay matter, right? So right now, the macro shows we're in a recession March, April, May-ish, and we don't know how bad it will be. So Q1 might be just at the beginning tailwinds of that, but it's too early to estimate the growth on that without a few more data points. And it depends how rapid this happens. So we'll see. So I think by the time Q2 rolls around, though, I think we'll definitely see some. If we aren't in a recession, we will be about to be in a recession, barring any other extraordinary economic changes. Chance of rainy days 100%. It's going to rain. I see no data that suggests that it won't, Albert. And that's the hard part. So we're right there. So Sue asks, question for Riley. How many quarters after May 23, how many quarters does it take to move to the positive area? That depends entirely on how the government, Congress, and the Federal Reserve respond. So let's give a few scenarios as an example. So let's say that the Fed meets next time, they raise rates for the last time. But consumer spending starts dropping in response to this. Companies start cutting back. They start reporting negative earnings in a really widespread way, or earnings, not earnings losses, but a decline in earnings, less profitability, and that starts hitting the market in force. As adjustments, companies start issuing periodic and often substantial layoffs. Unemployment increases from 3.7 to 4.2%. Technically, that's one of the indicators for what would cause a recession. Now, what happens then is the interesting question, Sue, and that's what I'm trying to get down to. So we can embark upon a bunch of policies, and it depends on the nature of where, you you look for any business question involves upon return on investment, the return on your initial input into something. And the best method depends on where we're seeing the most pain in response to the economic trajectory in a few months. So the Fed will reduce rates fairly quickly. You'll see rates drop into a recession pretty significantly. And they'll do so in an attempt to alleviate the recession. If they haven't overshot their rate increases, they might try to hedge it a bit. They might, and they don't drop it by 0.25%. They might drop it to 0 if it's severe, or they might drop it a whole percent or 2% over a series of months to kind of accommodate this. I suspect it will be more of the latter, but I'm very interested in the data that it happens. That'll be an attempt to jumpstart economic activity. But the only way to kind of get us out of this, and because of all this lagging indicators as we approach 2024, will be some type of stimulus, and that will depend on the makeup. I mean, obviously we know the makeup of Congress, but because we sort of have that split, House and Senate, it's interesting to see what bill they will come up in spending that will allow us to get out of that. And if we respond quickly and use a fair amount of energy and not overindulge to get us back into an inflationary environment, then it could be a fairly short recession, and it could be fairly moderate soon. But to your question about other issues, it is possible, and don't underestimate our inability to mess things up as they happen as a country. So do you think then or now is a good time to purchase a new home? I don't. With rates, that's a good question. Are you asking like, well, rates are still high, relatively speaking, to where asset prices are, in my opinion, in this country. And I know we can argue, okay, let's argue this. So on one hand, I'm like, yes, you can look at it and say, Riley, well, if you compare US asset prices to Canada or Australia, you'll notice that Canada and Australia have much higher asset prices, and none of those housing markets in the Western world are healthy by any standard. And you could ask this and say, well, we are seeing only part of the impact of rate increases on mortgages, on mortgage prices and asset prices. I don't think, if you have an option to wait, it's probably better to wait. but it depends on you. Like we have a little bit of runway where rates can go up more. We have a lot of runway where we have a lot of potential. We have much more potential for rates going down in response to macroeconomic issues. Rates will never be 2.5% again. That's fascinating, Sean. Really? With our asset prices this high? That's a really interesting. That is a bold statement, sir. That's really good. That's really fun. Rates will never be 2.5%. Sean and I have this discussion because we're both sitting on 2.5% mortgages. So obviously for our standpoint, people like, and then Riley was murdered by somebody for his mortgage. But you can't take it. I won't sign it away. It's you can pull my mortgage out of my DNA. It will be a long time before we see rates that low again in mortgage markets, but it can still go down from where it is now. That's true. Yes. And Sue's got a good point. Supply chain bottlenecks easing, other things happening, coming online, us responding positively and affirmatively across the board as an economy. Yes, I believe it could be mild, but it will be highly defended. Hey, Ron, Dr. I want to refi. You know how many letters you sound like my bank, Albert. You want to refi? Here, Riley. Well, you should refinance. Yes, Riley, we've noticed you paid down some of your house lately, and you could refinance your house. And I'm like, never. That's another thing as well. We hear this, for a very nice rate of 6. I know, really, this is what they say. They're like, wouldn't you want, yes, I want to voluntarily pay a couple, like $1,500 more per month because I'm This is exactly why I studied finance. This is why I did this. I didn't study it. I studied it so I wouldn't be bamboozled. But to the question about this, and that's where the thing is always double. When finance people come to you, always ask why. Always be very skeptical when banks come to you. What else you got? Anybody have any questions? I know for those 18 noble participants who stayed on the whole session, so glad to see you here. Glad you were able to make it. Anyone have any other questions I can answer? Because that does it for my main show today. Cool. Thank you guys for being an awesome audience. What career advice do you have for job seekers? All right, hit this out loud and clear on this, and this is very, very important. So in this era of rapidly changing technological and economic conditions, be flexible as to where you want to work, and this is very important. And I say this all the time. I was talking to somebody who is a librarian. Oh, thank you so much for all of these kind words. I read all of them. Talking to you makes my day. I appreciate this. I'm not compensated for this job other than just talking to you, which brings me joy. Like I love the Bay Area, I love the people, and I love how much you're working in your prospective areas. And I'm so appreciative for anybody who can withstand me for 75 minutes. It is pretty big. Yes, that's right. Albert's MBA is where we're going to go. For job seekers in specific, and I said this to a librarian friend, you know, you have a master's degree in really in information science. Look beyond the question of where you think you're only qualified to be trained for. Look for other businesses, other operational fields. Like just because I happen to be a business faculty member does not mean your limitations on what you can do or be is limited by your degree. You can enter those businesses, other fields, other sectors. Think broadly is what I would say. And particularly as you approach a recession and you're looking at this, you were working for Twitter for years, you were laid off by the market, by Elon Musk. He came into your office personally with that sink and he brought it to your desk and said, you're fired. And you come out and you say, what am I going to do with this? And then you're going to look at this and say, well, you know, you have a very marketable degree, and not only you're this part of the country, but everywhere in this country, you're in a hyper-competitive market full of brilliant people, and your ability to succeed in this market is against some of the best people in the world, period. And that is an extraordinary thing. So Nina on Facebook asked, when will we see rents go down? We're starting to see them a little bit, Nina. So the data preliminary and month to month, and a lot of this has to do with sort of that transaction. A lot of that has to do with just a rollover of people in from one place to another and apartments increasing rents. We're seeing it in the Bay Area now to a slight extent. The question is, of course, to like minus 1% to minus 3%, depending on where you are, unless you're in Concord. But everywhere else it's doing well in the sense that it's declining. Rents, if you're looking at a decline that's tremendous or significant, it will be in that area in response to the availability of jobs and retail spending income. When there's a net income loss in a region, or a net income loss in general due to an adverse economy, that does have a downward impact on rents. So I would look towards second quarter next year as being a source for some potential greater declines, but that's also going to be noisy because of the nature of how rents work and how people kind of adapt to different markets. That's a really good question. Sabrina on Facebook asks, could you please recap what indicators we should be looking at in Q1 to help predict recession severity? So one thing is you know, always pay attention to asset prices, pay attention to housing. So while of course you're looking at this and saying, oh, it's great if housing goes down 30%, it is actually terrible from an economic standpoint because of all the jobs that exist in that pathway. So the Fed's impetus or the Fed's desire to change is to reduce the asset bubble in a gradual way. That would be bad news bears. Also credit supply, unemployment, bankruptcies, of course, a good proxy for this. We went from having a very high savings rate in the middle of the pandemic due to the amount of stimulus that was added to one of the lowest historical savings rates. A lot of families are living quite precariously, and this will have an impact on the long run. And that saddens me in this period. The people, yeah, that's absolutely right. Albert, do you think this recession will be minor, like people are saying? I think it's possible to be minor, but I think it's also possible we can respond incorrectly to the economic data at hand and aggravate a recession that's already there, and aggravate, I should say, a recession that would otherwise be minor. And so again, the entirety of that decision making depends entirely on the response at the time. And right now, there's no responses I've read on the table for how and what we'd have because it's still too preliminary. And so we're going to do that. That'll be a futures Alberts list. Let's evaluate the proposals on their economic merits. Yes, exactly right, Angelica. You're competing with everybody globally. Inflection point. I'm most curious to see what happens when all these layoffs and whether it's an inflection point for the next Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, Pinterest, etc. Should we look at our 401ks next month? No, I think that's a really good question. So without giving you financial advice, I'm bearing in for like we had this debate was, oh, is the market going to be, I had somebody yell at me because they saw me on TV and I was in like a Costco and they're like, what's the market going to be at the end of the year? And I was like, it's going to be down where it was, down from where it was now. And this was back in like May or something. And he was like, no, it won't. I'm like, thank you, Costco person. And I'm like, I'm glad you just asked me. But I ended up being right about this because I know the market's pricing in the future. The market's pricing in relevance and earnings. And we haven't really seen a lot of bad earnings news yet. Now, when that happens, it will affect the markets in a negative way, but it also represents a huge opportunity to buy. And so when you're in an opportunity or looking at a situation where you're looking at sort of the nadir of the markets and there's not a lot of hope, that's an opportunity for you to start buying and looking at things, considering reallocating your 401k in a positive way. So Sue says it's easier for job seekers not to hang up on blue chip FANG-like companies. That's very true. I agree with that. There are a slew of small, medium companies and startups hiring. Absolutely agree. Sue, that's excellent advice. Albert, so what skills do you think will stand out for the next job cycle? We heard cybersecurity, anything else, AI, analytics, all of that stuff and more. And the nature of this, and for those of you who are like, so let me put it this way, if you're technically capable and you have all of that expertise, you're going to be fine. But those of you in the other places, and I know we have a few people, we have marketing people, other people, networking in people, and the ability to handle information, take a large amount of information, consolidate it into something people can understand and make decisions on is going to be the most incredibly valid thing that you can have. Dollar cost average, market to the, that's right. Dow Industrial average is down only 7.2%. That's right, only 7%, Albert. And that's why, one of those things that I point out is people are like, is this the end times? No, I think it could be worse. I think it's likely going to be worse. And it's likely the market for the next year is going to be really choppy. That is my bet. That sometimes we could go down much further than where we are today, but it depends again, sector-wise and everything else. Skills. So Angelica asks, of course, how to best transition to other sectors of work. Besides skills, connections with LinkedIn, in-person networking. That's true. I mean, everyone has different stories around this level, and we have, I'm an administrator for an educational institution, so my information is both very relevant in the sense that we have a lot of students this way, and very stale because I'm not actually hiring large masses of corporate folks, although I do have a staff. Now, when I think about this and I think about where we're going with this in the future, and I'm thinking about how people evaluate this and look at skills, networking is huge. It's still who you know. It's still your ability to do it. And this is the weird part. And I'll give you an example. Like right now, I am a business faculty member. People that I know in the community, when they want to hire students or hire our graduate students, they say, Riley, who are your best graduate students? And I'm like, we have career services. And we have this thing called, we have Handshake. We have other things that employers can engage with that allow them to post and evaluate opportunities. But they want a personal connection. They want somebody to say this person is really good, and professors have a lot of inside information on that for students and other things, and so they want me to recommend or tell students to, and I can't tell them because you don't disclose student information for FERPA, but you have these things where you have an opportunity to encourage your students to apply to specific areas because it's networking. It's people you know and people that can vouch for you as an individual, and that is so valuable. So valuable, especially across sectors of work. And so you can think about conferences, you think about other places, that's a place to meet people, but then you have to form some kind of working relationship with them. And one thing that's been really beneficial to me has been doing things that I'm not required to do, but do as a part of this job. And that's things like Albert's List, and that's things like engaging on boards in the community. And I serve on a bunch of boards, the Mexico Museum, investment committee, all these other things. And these boards are very helpful in engaging and networking people and helping to verify this. So how else can you connect with me? Do I have a channel at your school? Not right now. I'm going to work on this as well. I don't have a lot of time in this, but you can always find me. I have a website Albert's pointing out right now. And of course, LinkedIn and other places. Never hesitate to reach out with any questions. Likewise, happy to help out any way that I can. And I'm grateful for all of your fantastic questions today. That was cool. Good questions. I know I talk fast, but a lot of people in the Bay Area do, and they can take care of it. Here, I try to order a hamburger and people are like, no, we're not. I have no idea what you just said. But one thing is, I'm very grateful for your patience and your time. Thank you for asking questions like you have. This is great. You all get A's. Good job. Except Sean, he gets a B+.
4.0 GPAs for everybody. I love it. All right.
Cool. Anything else? Anyone else? Thank you, Albert.
Yeah, I mean, we have a few more minutes for questions, but if nobody has any, I want to thank you, Dr. White, for your work with us this year, and we'll have you next year as well, especially when things get even rockier. And thank you those for attending tonight and spending some of your time. We're going to have it available in our YouTube channel soon, and I'll follow up with all of you when that is live. For more events, I want you to invite you to check out our Eventbrite page. Our next event is Tuesday, December 19th, where we'll be hosting a resume review workshop, and we'll hope to see you then. As far as Dr. White, he'll be here next month after the next Bureau of Labor Statistics CPI report. And so he'll be here. And I think you'll also be here to provide your 2023 predictions, right?
I'll be here for 2023 projections in January. I'm looking for a few more data points to make this happen, but hopefully it'll be good. And then you can come back to me in December and prove me wrong, and I will be.
I mean, we're gonna hope that you're
50-50.
wrong, that there's no risk.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, guys.
So look out for an invite for the next one in January. We will see you then. Good night, everybody, and talk